The courtroom camera captured something that would haunt America forever. A 17-year-old killer sat slouched in his chair, rolling his eyes as Judge Judy read the charges against him. What happened in the next 17 minutes would become the most watched courtroom video in internet history, shared over 50 million times across every platform. But here's what nobody knew when those cameras started rolling. The boy's own mother was sitting in that courtroom, and she had made a decision that would destroy her son's arrogance forever and restore an entire nation's faith in justice. Before we dive into this incredible case, tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing where my viewers are around the world. And don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you never miss more unbelievable cases like this one. Now sit back, relax, and enjoy the video. Marcus Thompson thought he had it all figured out. At just 17, he'd already beaten the system twice. Juvenile court, plea bargains, sympathetic judges who saw a troubled youth instead of what he really was. A cold-blooded killer who had taken an innocent life and felt absolutely no remorse. He walked into Judge Judy's courtroom that Tuesday morning with the same smirk he'd worn through every legal proceeding. The same dead eyes that showed no empathy, no accountability, no respect for anyone or anything. What Marcus didn't know was that his mother, Patricia Thompson, had spent the previous sleepless night making the hardest decision any parent could ever make. She had called the district attorney's office. She had spoken to Judge Judy's producers, and she had done something that would change both their lives forever. But we'll get to that devastating moment that broke the internet and restored millions of people's faith in parental accountability. Judge Judy had seen thousands of cocky teenagers walk through her courtroom doors over 25 years. Kids who thought their age was a shield, who believed manipulation would work, who assumed they could charm or intimidate their way out of consequences. But she had never encountered anything quite like Marcus Thompson. Within 30 seconds of opening his mouth, he would commit an act of disrespect so shocking that even veteran court staff would later say they couldn't believe what they witnessed. The victim's family sat in the front row, still grieving, still seeking justice for their daughter who would never come home again. They had no idea they were about to witness something that would give them the closure they'd been desperately seeking. Because sometimes justice doesn't come from a judge's gavel. Sometimes it comes from the most unexpected source imaginable. Sometimes it comes from a mother's love being stronger than a mother's protection. Before we show you the moment that changed everything, before we reveal what Patricia Thompson said that left her son speechless and brought the entire courtroom to tears, you need to hit that subscribe button right now. Because what you're about to see will restore your faith in accountability, in justice, and in the power of a parent who chooses truth over comfort. This isn't just a courtroom drama. This is the moment when enabling ended and real love began. And trust me, you've never seen anything like what happens when Judge Judy and a grieving mother team up to deliver the reality check that America desperately needed to see. Marcus Thompson wasn't born evil, but by 17, he had perfected the art of destroying lives without feeling a single moment of genuine remorse. The crime that brought him to Judge Judy's courtroom was as senseless as it was brutal. On a cold February night, he had taken the life of 16-year-old Sarah Martinez during what prosecutors called a robbery gone wrong. But those who knew Marcus understood the terrifying truth. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. This was a calculated act by someone who had learned that being a minor meant different rules, lighter sentences, and endless second chances. Sarah Martinez had been walking home from her job at a local bookstore when Marcus approached her. Security cameras captured the entire encounter. There was no struggle, no resistance from Sarah. She handed over her purse immediately, exactly as her parents had taught her. But Marcus shot her anyway, point blank. Then he stood over her body for 37 seconds, showing no emotion, no panic, no regret. He calmly walked away while Sarah bled out on the sidewalk, calling for her mother with her final breaths. What made this case even more chilling was Marcus's behavior in the weeks that followed his arrest. While Sarah's family planned a funeral, Marcus was seen laughing with friends, posting on social media, and acting like nothing had happened. When police arrested him 3 days later, his first words weren't about Sarah or her family. They were about wanting to call his lawyer. No remorse, no acknowledgement of what he'd taken from the world, just cold, calculated self-preservation. This wasn't Marcus's first encounter with the justice system, and everyone in that courtroom knew it. At 14, he'd been arrested for armed robbery. The judge gave him community service and counseling, calling him a child who needed guidance. At 15, he'd been caught dealing drugs outside a middle school. Another sympathetic judge, another program, another chance to prove he could change. At 16, he'd assaulted a classmate so badly the boy needed reconstructive surgery. The juvenile court sealed his records and sent him to anger management classes. Each time, Marcus learned the same lesson. The system wasn't designed to punish him. It was designed to rehabilitate him. And he had mastered the art of playing along with that rehabilitation while becoming more dangerous with each passing year. He knew exactly what to say in counseling sessions, how to appear remorseful during sentencing, and most importantly, how to use his age as a shield against real consequences. Marcus had studied the juvenile justice system like other kids study video games. He knew that sealed records meant fresh starts. He knew that judges preferred treatment to punishment. He knew that being 17 meant he could commit almost any crime and still walk free before his 21st birthday. The system had taught him that accountability was optional, that consequences were negotiable, and that victims were less important than his potential for reform. But Marcus had made one crucial miscalculation that would prove fatal to his arrogance. He assumed that every authority figure would treat him the same way. He assumed that his practiced expressions of fake remorse would work on everyone. He assumed that his ability to manipulate caring adults would extend to Judge Judy's courtroom. He had never encountered someone who didn't care about his age, his potential, or his sob story. Someone who only cared about truth, accountability, and justice. His confidence was so complete that he had actually bragged to other inmates about appearing on Judge Judy. He told them it would be easy, that daytime TV judges were just entertainers, that he'd probably become famous and maybe even make some money from the appearance. He spent the morning before his court date, practicing his innocent expressions in the mirror, perfecting the same look that had fooled so many well-meaning adults who wanted to believe in his capacity for change. What Marcus didn't understand was that Judge Judy had dealt with thousands of Marcus Thompsons over her career. She had seen the pattern. The fake remorse followed by repeat offenses, the manipulation disguised as rehabilitation, the exploitation of a system designed to help troubled youth by predators who had learned to game that system. She knew exactly what Marcus was the moment he walked through her courtroom doors. Even more dangerous to his confidence was something Marcus couldn't see from the defendant's table. Sitting in the third row, dressed in black, was the one person who knew him better than anyone else in that courtroom. Patricia Thompson had given birth to Marcus, raised him, defended him through every arrest and every court appearance. She had been his biggest advocate, his strongest defender, his most reliable enabler. Until the night Sarah Martinez died. That night everything changed for Patricia Thompson, and she was about to show her son exactly what accountability really looked like. Judge Judy Scheindlin had built her legendary reputation on one unshakable principle that terrified manipulative teenagers across America. She didn't care about your age, your excuses, or your potential. She cared about what you did, why you did it, and whether you had the courage to take responsibility for the consequences. After 25 years on the family court bench in Manhattan, she had developed an almost supernatural ability to see through teenage manipulation in seconds, and Marcus Thompson was about to discover that his usual tricks wouldn't just fail in her courtroom, they would backfire spectacularly. What made Judge Judy particularly lethal to young criminals like Marcus was her complete immunity to the sob stories and fake remorse that had fooled every other judge he'd faced. She had heard every excuse, seen every crocodile tear, and watched countless teenagers try to use their youth as a get-out-of-jail-free card. While other judges saw potential for rehabilitation, Judge Judy saw patterns of behavior. While others focused on second chances, she focused on first accountability. And she had zero patience for killers who thought their age made them untouchable. Judge Judy's approach with young offenders was surgical in its precision. She would start with simple questions designed to measure respect and accountability. Do you understand why you're here? Do you take responsibility for your actions? Do you comprehend the pain you've caused? These weren't just questions, they were tests. Tests that revealed whether she was dealing with a genuinely remorseful young person or a calculating predator who had learned to exploit the system's compassion. Her reputation in legal circles was legendary, but among teenage criminals it was absolutely terrifying. Word had spread through juvenile detention centers and youth programs about what happened when cocky kids tried to manipulate Judge Judy. She didn't lecture them about their potential like school counselors. She didn't offer them programs and second chances like juvenile court judges. She held up a mirror and forced them to see exactly what they had become, often in ways that shattered their carefully constructed delusions of invincibility. What made Judge Judy's courtroom particularly dangerous for someone like Marcus was her complete indifference to the usual teenage defense mechanisms. Sulking didn't work. Eye-rolling earned immediate correction. Disrespect triggered an escalation that most teenagers weren't prepared to handle. She treated 17-year-old killers exactly the same way she treated 40-year-old killers, with the same expectations for accountability and the same consequences for continued manipulation. Judge Judy had been specifically chosen for Marcus's case because 3 previous judges had failed to break through his arrogance. The district attorney's office knew that if anyone could expose Marcus Thompson for what he really was, it would be the woman who had spent decades refusing to let age excuse evil. They needed someone who wouldn't be charmed by his fake remorse or intimidated by his practiced indifference. As Marcus Thompson prepared to walk into her courtroom that morning, he had no idea he was about to face the one authority figure in America who was completely immune to his manipulation, utterly unimpressed by his attitude, and absolutely determined to hold him accountable for taking Sarah Martinez's life. The moment Marcus Thompson shuffled into Judge Judy's courtroom, his body language announced exactly what kind of performance he planned to deliver. He slouched in his chair like he was settling in to watch television, not face justice for taking a human life. His eyes wandered around the room with bored indifference, occasionally stopping to smirk at the cameras as if this were all an entertaining game designed for his amusement. What Marcus didn't realize was that every gesture, every eye roll, every calculated display of disrespect was being catalogued by a judge who had seen this exact performance 1,000 times before. Judge Judy began with her standard opening, reading the charges with the gravity they deserved: murder in the second degree, armed robbery, destruction of a family, the taking of 16-year-old Sarah Martinez's life in cold blood. As she spoke Sarah's name, something remarkable happened in that courtroom. Everyone, the court staff, the gallery, even the cameraman, showed visible respect for the victim being remembered. Everyone except Marcus Thompson, who actually yawned during the reading of the charges that had destroyed the Martinez family forever. When Judge Judy asked her first question, the tone was professional but firm. "Mr. Thompson, do you understand the charges against you?" Marcus's response revealed everything wrong with his character in just 5 words. "Yeah, whatever, I guess so." Not "yes, Your Honor," not an acknowledgement of the seriousness of the moment. Just casual dismissal delivered with a shrug that suggested this entire proceeding was beneath his attention. Judge Judy's eyes narrowed slightly, recognizing immediately that she was dealing with a textbook sociopath who believed his age made him immune to real consequences. The questioning continued, and with each exchange, Marcus's disrespect became more brazen and more calculated. When asked if he understood the impact his actions had on Sarah's family, he responded with a theatrical sigh and said, "Look, lady, stuff happens, all right? People die every day." The words hung in the air like poison. Sarah Martinez's mother, sitting in the front row, let out a quiet sob. Her daughter's killer had just referred to her murder as "stuff happens," while addressing a federal judge as "lady." Judge Judy's warning was clear and measured. "Mr. Thompson, you will address this court with respect. You will sit up straight, and you will acknowledge the gravity of what you've done." But Marcus had misread the room completely. Instead of compliance, he saw this as a challenge to his carefully constructed image of invincibility. He leaned further back in his chair, crossed his arms, and delivered the response that would seal his fate. "Or what? You gonna send me to my room? I'm just a kid, remember?" The courtroom atmosphere changed instantly. Veteran court officers who had seen everything in their decades of service exchanged shocked glances. The stenographer actually paused her typing for a moment, unable to believe what she had just heard. A 17-year-old killer had just mocked Judge Judy to her face, while dismissing his victim's murder as a trivial inconvenience. Even by the standards of juvenile court, this level of calculated disrespect was unprecedented. Judge Judy's response was controlled but deadly. "Mr. Thompson, you seem to believe that your age protects you from accountability. You seem to think that being 17 means the rules don't apply to you. Is that correct?" Marcus, feeling confident that he had successfully established his untouchable status, made the fatal mistake of doubling down. Pretty much, yeah. What's the worst that can happen? Juvie until I'm 21? Big deal. I'll be out living my life while you're still here judging people on TV. The silence that followed was deafening. Marcus had just confessed to viewing Sarah Martinez's murder as nothing more than a temporary inconvenience. He had openly mocked the justice system, disrespected a federal judge, and demonstrated complete sociopathic indifference to the pain he had caused. But what Marcus didn't notice was the movement in the gallery behind him. What he couldn't see was the woman in the third row who had been watching this entire exchange with growing horror and shame. Patricia Thompson had raised the boy sitting at that defendant's table, but she was watching a monster perform for the cameras. Every eye roll, every smirk, every calculated insult was a dagger through her heart. She had spent 17 years defending this child, making excuses for his behavior, enabling his belief that consequences were optional. But watching him mock Sarah Martinez's death while disrespecting Judge Judy had finally shown her the truth she had been avoiding for years. Her son wasn't a troubled teenager who needed more chances. He was a killer who felt no remorse, and her years of protection had helped create the monster now performing for America's cameras. Patricia Thompson rose slowly from her seat, her decision made. It was time to choose between enabling her son's evil and supporting justice for Sarah Martinez. Judge Judy had dealt with disrespectful teenagers for decades, but Marcus Thompson's performance was testing even her legendary patience. She was formulating her response to his latest insult when something unprecedented happened in her courtroom. A movement in the gallery caught her eye. A woman in a black dress was slowly rising from her seat in the third row, tears streaming down her face, her hands trembling with what looked like a mixture of grief and determination. Marcus was still basking in what he believed was his victory over the judicial system, completely unaware that his world was about to collapse. He was actually smiling at the cameras when Judge Judy's attention shifted to the standing woman. "Ma'am," Judge Judy said, her voice carrying a note of curiosity, "do you have something you'd like to say to this court?" The question hung in the air, and for the first time since entering the courtroom, Marcus turned around to see who had interrupted his performance. The smile died on his face instantly. The color drained from his cheeks. The cocky teenager who had been mocking a federal judge seconds earlier suddenly looked like exactly what he was. A 17-year-old boy who had just realized his biggest supporter was about to become his harshest critic. "Mom?" he whispered, the word barely audible but picked up by the courtroom microphones. "Mom, what are you doing here?" Patricia Thompson walked down the aisle with measured steps, each footfall echoing through the silent courtroom like a countdown to Judgment Day. Court officers tensed slightly, unsure of protocol for this unprecedented situation, but Judge Judy gestured for them to allow her approach. Every person in that courtroom understood they were witnessing something extraordinary. A mother was about to choose justice over protection, truth over enabling, accountability over unconditional support. When Patricia reached the front of the courtroom, she turned to face Judge Judy first, her voice steady despite the tears. "Your Honor, I am Patricia Thompson. I am this defendant's mother, and I need permission to address this court about my son's behavior." Judge Judy nodded solemnly, recognizing that whatever was about to happen would be more powerful than any sentence she could deliver. Marcus sat frozen, his earlier arrogance completely evaporated. For the first time in years, he looked genuinely afraid. The one person who had always stood by him, always made excuses for him, always protected him from consequences, was standing in a federal courtroom, asking permission to testify against him. The boy who thought he was untouchable was about to learn what accountability really meant. Patricia Thompson's voice cut through the courtroom's silence like a blade through Marcus's arrogance. "Your Honor, I want to apologize to you, to Sarah's family, and to everyone who had to witness my son's disgusting behavior today. The disrespect he showed you does not represent how I raised him, but it absolutely represents who he has chosen to become." She turned to face Marcus, who was now slumped forward, his cockiness completely shattered. "Marcus, I have made excuses for you for 17 years. I told myself you were troubled, that you needed more chances, that you would eventually find your way. But watching you mock Sarah Martinez's death, watching you disrespect this court, watching you treat her family's pain like entertainment, I finally see the truth." Her voice grew stronger. "I enabled a killer. Sarah Martinez is dead because I taught you that consequences were optional, that your age was a shield, that my love meant protecting you from accountability. Your Honor, I will no longer make excuses for evil. I will no longer enable his belief that being my son makes him untouchable. He took an innocent girl's life and he feels nothing." Patricia's final words broke Marcus completely. "Give him the justice I failed to provide. Give Sarah's family the accountability they deserve." The transformation in Marcus Thompson was instantaneous and complete. The cocky teenager who had mocked Judge Judy and dismissed Sarah Martinez's death was gone, replaced by a broken 17-year-old who finally understood that his shield of invincibility had just been destroyed by the one person he thought would never abandon him. He sat hunched over, sobbing uncontrollably, his carefully constructed facade of indifference shattered by his mother's devastating testimony. Judge Judy's response was swift and decisive. "Mr. Thompson, your mother has just demonstrated more courage and integrity than you have shown in your entire 17 years. She has chosen justice over comfort, truth over enabling, and accountability over unconditional protection. I suggest you learn from her example." The sentence that followed reflected Patricia's impact. Marcus would be tried as an adult, facing life imprisonment for Sarah Martinez's murder. The courtroom erupted in applause for Patricia Thompson's courage. Sarah's parents, who had watched their daughter's killer mock their pain, finally saw the accountability they had been desperately seeking. Court staff, who had witnessed thousands of cases, later said they had never seen anything more powerful than a mother choosing justice over protection. Within hours, the video had gone viral across every platform. The hashtag #MothersChooseJustice trended worldwide as millions of parents shared Patricia's story, praising her impossible but necessary decision. Legal experts called it the most powerful demonstration of parental accountability in courtroom history. Child psychologists used the footage to teach about the dangers of enabling versus supporting. But the most profound impact was on other families facing similar choices. Hundreds of parents reached out to Patricia, sharing their own struggles with children who had crossed moral lines. Support groups formed around her example of choosing tough love over blind protection. The Patricia Thompson Foundation was established to help families navigate the heartbreaking decision between enabling and accountability. For Marcus Thompson, his mother's testimony became the turning point that no amount of juvenile court intervention had achieved. Facing life in prison with no one left to make excuses for him, he finally began the genuine rehabilitation that years of enabled behavior had prevented. Patricia Thompson's courage that day didn't just deliver justice for Sarah Martinez. It showed millions of viewers that real love sometimes means letting consequences happen, that accountability isn't cruelty, and that the hardest parenting decisions are often the most necessary ones. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to protect someone from the truth about who they've become. If this story of a mother's impossible courage moved you, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Drop a comment below about the hardest choice you've ever had to make for someone you love, because sometimes love means choosing justice over comfort and truth over protection.